Before we begin with this episode, I want you to do something for me. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and listen closely. Think about a particular moment, one specific bright moment. It doesn't have to be anything important. It doesn't have to be a traumatic moment. It doesn't have to have some sort of symbolism. Nothing. But conjure up one glorious moment from the vast expanse of your childhood. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. This is Simran, and this is my podcast Shelf Life, where we talk about books, their philosophies, but most importantly, our personal relationship with a book. And we are in for another week. I hope you've had a really wonderful, really productive, restful, glorious week. For me, actually, um, it's been quite eventful. It's been stressful and restful, and in moments happy, in moments excited, in moments um, very freaked out. But yeah, it's been a combination of all of these moments, and I've had some stuff, done this week. So I'm quite proud of myself for that as well. And yeah, so last week we talked about The Choice by Edith Eger, and I hope that that book did a lot for you guys. I mean, it did a lot for me when I read it, and in fact, in this whole process of going back to that book and going over some of my favorite parts from that book, I realized that I was really, um, in the need for another hard hitting self help, true blue self help book. Uh, and I felt like I wanted to go back to some of the books that I used to read. For example, I don't know if you know this, but I've talked about it a lot. I used to read a lot of Caroline Leaf's work. If you don't know who that is, she is a neuroscientist who works in the field of mental health, and also she basically studies the mind brain body connection. And her research work is actually really fascinating and very, very empowering. So she's someone that I really, really um, loved reading about, and I would watch her podcast a lot. But I realized that I hadn't been doing that for a bit. So yeah, I thought I'd go back to it, check it out again, and see if I need some, what do you say? It's like doing a little bit of a checkup on yourself, like a mental health checkup. And yeah, I think we are all in the need for that for sure, myself included. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. I've been rereading some of her work. I've also been reading this book called let me just pull that up. I keep forgetting the names of the books I'm reading. Yeah, I've been reading this book called The Worry Free Mind. Train your brain and discover a happier, more productive self. So it's a very classic self-help book. It's written by, okay, I think I might have said, yeah, it's The Worry Free Mind, Calm the Stress Spin Cycle, and Discover a Happier, More Productive You. Okay, that's the name of the book. See, this is what I'm talking about. I keep forgetting the names of the books that I'm reading. But yeah, that's what I've been reading. I've also been reading a couple of spiritual books on the side. I have been reading uh, Joseph Prince's work. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's a pastor who's really famous, and he has a couple of books on spirituality out. So that's what I've been reading, and I haven't been reading fiction lately because I've just been really caught up with a lot of work. So I don't really have the time to invest in a story as much. But I promise I will be getting back to that, that's for sure. And the book that I wanted to talk about today actually stems from that need as well, that need to connect with uh, a story that sort of ignites some, you know, hidden part of myself, probably, or some that connects somewhere deep inside, that I feel like I probably don't have the time for anymore, but I know that I probably should. The book that I'm talking about is called The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and this is a classic. Most people read this book when they were kids or when they were young adolescents. I read it last year when I read it when I was 18. That was 2 years ago, and I read it as a part of my um, my syllabus, my semester exam. I did it as part of my literature study, and yeah, I think I wanted to pick this book up because that's essentially why I wanted to pick it up, because I think I feel like we all sort of somewhere down the line feel this need to go back to our childhoods, right? Especially when you've been caught up with possibly a hectic work week, or if you've been, really stressed out about whatever it is, right? Just life stressors. Um, I think that's when you subconsciously feel this need to go back. You don't really accept it, you don't really know how to name it, because uh, that process of growing up, especially in our culture, in our world right now, the way it looks, um, you know, and everything with the whole hustle culture on the side as well, with that culture of hyper productivity. I think it's so easy to not be able to recognize this need to go back to our childhoods, this need to remain in a restful state, in a calm mind, in a calm, worry free mind. It's so easy to just sidetrack that, to not see it. I mean, I know that I do it quite a few times as well. I know a lot of people who do that. And it's not like you do it, consciously. It's not like you are forcing yourself to grow up, but I think you just accept it. That's how it goes. You sort of jolt into adulthood without even realizing it. I don't know if every generation feels like that, though. I don't know if some of the older folks probably watching this could enlighten me about this. Was it the same experience growing up, say, in the 90s or in the 80s? Coming into adulthood in the 80s and 90s, was it the same sort of feeling? Like you were just jolted into another phase of your life without sort of any kind of warning or any, I don't know, any, um, not warning, but I don't know, any alarms? Did you feel like it just came on and you didn't really know where to go, but you knew that you had to keep going? Um, and a lot of times that meant not looking back. So yeah, I don't know if that's the same for every generation, but that's how it feels right now for sure. So you guys could tell me, yeah, how is that like? And is it the same? Is it weirder? Is it harder? Let me know. Anyway, the book that we're going to be talking about today is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. And this is a book that was written many, 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 many years ago. And it is a satirical novel. And it is considered Mark Twain's, masterpiece. That is, of course, until you read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which I feel, in my personal opinion, is the bigger of a masterpiece. I don't know. Did I frame that right? It's the better of the two, I feel. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and I think you need to get into this book first to really understand the world of Huckleberry Finn, and you should ideally follow it up right after. But anyway, Tom Sawyer is a very young boy. Okay, he's a young boy who lives in this town, in the town of St. Petersburg in Missouri. Okay, he lives along the Mississippi River, and he lives with his aunt Polly and his half brother and sister. His parents are dead, so Tom Sawyer is an orphan, and he lives a pretty jovial life. When the book opens, you see him just messing around. He is running away from his aunt, and he's got chocolate smeared all over his face. He's just a carefree boy. And as the book progresses, you realize that Tom is actually um, a little bit rebellious, a little bit reckless as well. He doesn't really care much about the society he lives in, the community he lives in, which, by the way, is very close knit. Everybody knows everybody there. They all go to the same church, and the head of the church, so to say, is the father of the girl that he likes. So there's a kind of a love interest going on there as well. There's a girl he likes. Her name's Betty. But Tom has a lot of other things that occupy his mind constantly. For example, how do you mess with Aunt Polly? Or how do you sneak out of school with your friends? How do you mess around with some of the old people in town? It's just, I think it's a quintessential boyhood book, right? I think a lot of boys sort of learned how to be boys through Tom Sawyer. Everything that you hear about boyhood, everything that you hear about the mischievous, notorious boy, the one that you keep telling stories about well into their adulthood, he is that boy. He embodies everything like that. So yeah, and it's a very typical novel in that sense, which is why I think for me going into it when I read it, I'm gonna be very honest, I was not in any mood to read it. I remember it was the first time we had to read a novel, a classic novel at that, for analysis purposes, right? We had to analyze that novel and critically analyze it and write a paper on it and answer questions based off of it. So it was the first time I had to do that, and I was really not in any mood for it. We were, we had just finished reading 1984, which is a novel by George Orwell, a dystopic novel, extremely scary. We had done an episode on that as well, so we had just finished reading that. And then we had to jump into Tom Sawyer, and this was a completely different vibe. This was a completely different atmosphere in itself, and to do that, um, it takes a lot, jumping from a really heavy book to something as light as this. It kind of bothered me, and I think, reading while I was reading it, the fact that the way that Tom Sawyer is described, and the stuff that he does, the way he talks, the way he has that bravado, that very masculine world that he lives in, you you kind of see that this is a boy who's going to grow up to be the very quintessential, man of men. He is going to be that guy who is the life of the party, who is very who possibly says the wrong thing at the wrong time, but he's forgiven because he is charming. He has, he throws these lines probably all the time, and they're inappropriate for sure, but they're also forgiven because he is charming. So I don't know, I think I had that image of Tom Sawyer going in, and reading about, the whole first half of the book felt so uh, excruciatingly painful to read because I think I just went in with these notions of boyhood that I just didn't agree with. I just couldn't, A, I couldn't relate to it, and B, I didn't find that, um, I didn't find myself being a fan of Tom Sawyer at any point. Um, and I know that, the argument is always that, this is a satirical novel, this is a humorous novel as well. He has these misadventures, honestly. Uh, where he gets into trouble, he sees stuff, does stuff that he's not supposed to. For example, a very important part of the book is when Tom and his two friends, one of them Huckleberry Finn, they sort of fake his death and travel alone to another nearby island and spend a couple of days there, in fact, while at home everybody is mourning Tom because they think he's dead. And he lets that go on for a while until he comes back and he assumes the aura of a hero. He makes that heroic entry and he's seemingly come back from the dead and everybody loves him. He's the hero of the town. And I think when I was reading that, I didn't really perceive it to be all of that fun. All that fun. I don't know, I just didn't. Because my experience of a childhood, my experience of girlhood is extremely different and in no way same or similar. We don't inhabit the same worlds. But I think that's where a very important challenge comes in. How do you read such books? How do you read books that you don't necessarily find yourselves in? Are you supposed to find yourselves in books? Like, is that something that you keep looking for? Is that something that is important to you? It's something that for a long time was important to me, and I think this book was the reason it stopped being important to me. I sort of stopped looking at myself through the lens of the character or through the lens of all the characters in the book. For example, when I started reading this book, I realized that I had this inherent bias, or I don't know if you call it a bias or what, but I don't know why, but I felt the need to at least try to relate to Betty's character, Tom's love interest character. I don't know why, because she's the sole female kind of character in the book who's, of any importance or something like that. And I don't know why I felt the need to try to relate to her. I don't know why. And I obviously couldn't because Betty's character is very one dimensional and, it doesn't really serve a purpose in the larger scheme of things. And you could argue probably that Mark Twain is a little bit lazy in that sense, in the way that he wrote that character. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know why. I didn't know how to stop that. I knew that I was doing it, but I guess it's just a thing. And there were a lot of other things with the book that I possibly had an issue with. I think the fact that I personally felt that Huckleberry Finn, who's actually a very who's a bit more um, devious, you could say, than Tom Sawyer. He's the kid that kind of everybody sort of gives up on, in the sense that he is the son of a drunkard. Huckleberry Finn doesn't go to school or church. He doesn't listen to anybody. He sort of just roams around on his own, does whatever he does. There's no one to look after him. He smokes, he drinks, he does all sorts of mischief. And he has nobody to sort of discipline him or care for him. And he does all the things that Tom Sawyer does, but Tom Sawyer gets praised for it and loved despite it. Whereas Huckleberry Finn doesn't really find that. And I personally felt that the journey that kind of character took throughout the book was very interesting for me, because in the end, this is the kind of book that's going to promise you a happy ending. So I can tell you straight up that Tom and Huckleberry Finn, they kind of come redeemed. They become the heroes of the town, and they have pretty interesting personal journeys as well. They become nicer, more respectable human beings. They contribute to the society they live in. One can say they integrate into the society. They become part of it. They don't they're not rebels anymore. So you could look at it from that angle as well, that Mark Twain actually teaches a lot of young children how to be one with society, right? I think when you pick up this book, if you're probably in that stage where you sort of just want to rebel, you sort of want to do whatever you want to do, you don't really like the idea of conformity, I think this book, the reason why it's so loved by everybody and why it's a part of the semester, for example, is because it teaches you to be, again, to integrate into the society. It teaches you how to be in it instead of out of it. And that's interesting because there's a lot of mention of, religion and how it becomes fossilized and how there's not really, he mocks religion very clearly in the fact that there's one church in the society, in the town they live in, and everybody in that church is quite hypocritical, quite deceiving, but and he sees Mark Twain as kind of pointing at the weird aspects of that church, but you know that what he really aims at is bringing you towards it. And he doesn't want Tom Sawyer to become an outcast. He doesn't want Huckleberry Finn to remain the kid who's just gone down the drain. So I think it's, when you look at it in that sense, it's quite perfect, the book. It's perfect in the sense that it does exactly what you need stuff like this to do. It brings people in, it brings children in, it teaches them certain values like how to respect community, how to respect your elders, how to, be a responsible adult. And it also teaches them that, you know what, society is gonna suck sometimes. People are gonna be weird and they're gonna be hypocritical and they're gonna do things that are messy and weird and deceiving, but this is just how it all is. And we're all part of it and we can get through it together. So yeah, I think very interesting in a lot of ways. You love the book, but you also hate the book. You hate the book, but you also love the book. That's the experience I had when I was reading it, and I think it really pushed me to go back and look at my own childhood. I started this episode with asking you guys about your favorite moment from your childhood. Not your favorite, but one moment that that kind of represented your childhood. And for me, honestly speaking, when I asked myself that question, I didn't know what was going to pop up, but the image that came into my mind was, these really hot summer days, sunny and windy at the same time. Windy in the sense it was breezy, but not warm breeze, not that kind of warm breeze that goes on right now. Like winter, summers right now are horrible, but back when I was a kid, it was quite more pleasant. So yeah, I remember sunny mornings. Um, I remember playing cricket with my friends from my building, and going down really early in the morning, coming back really late in the afternoon. When you came back, you were all sweaty and tired after having played all day. You kind of took a really quick bath and then you sat back in the hall, put the TV on. And I remember my mom used to make these milk cones for us, frozen milk cones. They were supposed to resemble ice creams, and they did, but they were homemade, so you got that, that homely feeling. And I remember she used to keep those in the deep freezer every single day, all summer. And my sister and I would come back really tired, and that was the first thing we had. I don't even think we had lunch, we just had that. And it was enough. You watched cartoons all afternoon, all evening, and then you went back to play in the evening. That was every summer. That was all we did in summer. And I think, I don't know why, but that's the image that always comes into my mind when I think about it. And yeah, what a glorious moment to ponder on, to think about. So I think that's how all of our childhoods kind of were, right? I mean, no matter how weird or tumultuous it would have been. I mean, mine definitely was. I was a pretty rebellious kid myself. I was pretty Tom Sawyer like myself. Um, but there's also so many other wonderful, glorious moments that you can't really miss. And I think it's so special that when you look back on it, it's always those fun moments that you remember. And for whatever reason, if you don't remember those fun moments, or if you feel like you didn't have them, that's okay too. But I would kind of beg you to look beyond that. Maybe there was something that stuck out. Maybe there was something that still made you feel good about your childhood. And I'm sure everybody had that, no matter how difficult it would have been for you. And I'm sure it can be, childhoods are pretty messy for a lot of people. But if you had anything that really stuck with you, that still brings a smile to your face, I feel like that's worth it. And I think that's all that, this book does as well. It gives you that slice of life sort of feel. It gives you that adventure. It gives you that sense of momentary happiness, even if it's just temporary, even if it's not really substantial, it didn't really do much, your childhood was still sucky, it's fine. It gives you that moment, you know. And I think that does mean something. That is worth it. So I would really, urge you to pick this book up because it is worth it. It was so beautiful to read. Even with all of the issues that I had, even with all of these things, I remember I used to keep bringing up these issues in class, and I think my professor sort of got annoyed with me because I could see that she really loved the book. But I remember having so many issues with the book. But she appreciated it. I'm sure she did. Um, and yeah, I think I still have. I had a good time reading it. I had a really good time reading it, and I still have all these sticky notes on my copy of the book. There's so many notes that I had made related to every chapter and every little thing that they used to talk about in the book. So much stuck out for me, and I'm sure that you're gonna take back a lot from it as well. So I urge you, if you really want to go back to your childhood one more time, just visit it once again for a little bit. Just see what that space feels like for you. If it brings up some positive, healthy emotions, great. If it brings up something painful, maybe sit with it. Maybe kind of process it a little bit and see if you can do something about it. If you can turn that into something pretty. So yeah, go ahead, check it out, and let me know what you felt. I'm open to your suggestions. I'm open to new criticisms. Um, More critique is always better. Yeah, I hope you have a really great week ahead. I hope you have fun. Pick up this book and tell me if you liked it, okay? And have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next time.